I thought you were gonna intro. Patik mo the intro dun.
Iya udah intro dun. Ba't ka thumbnail dun? Kada thumbnail dun.
Good evening, good morning, good afternoon, wherever you are in the world. Welcome back to a new episode of Social Convos. It is May. We're already in the month of May. That's been gone in quite a
Quite quickly?
flash, I gotta
Yeah,
say. Yeah.
yeah, definitely, definitely. Well, for me, it's a little bit more easygoing, but we'll get into that topic in a bit today. But before we do, as always, we would like to let you know that you can follow us and watch these episodes live as our live and watch the recordings on youtube.com/at Confoes. But also, we're also on Substack and Instagram. Let me do Instagram first at Confoes and on Substack on confoes.substack.com. If you want to follow us more from a written perspective, make sure to check out our Substack because that's where we do all the writing and some video footage as well. But if you want to watch it live or watch the episodes, you can do that on YouTube. Instagram is more for the fun stuff. And of course, we're on all streaming platforms if you just want to listen to this as a podcast. And without further ado, I think we can go straight into the topic, right?
Yeah, definitely. As you might have surmised from the title, let's go on a trip.
Yeah,
Last month we talked about,
that's not a trip on drugs, to be clear, for people that were thinking like, oh, you're gonna talk about. No, it's not that kind of trip. But
although, that's an option as well. Maybe
yeah, yeah,
we'll
we
go
I
in that
probably
direction one way, but
yeah, I probably have a guest who's been dying to talk about that, but I'm not sure whether or not I'll be able to find his contacts. But let's talk about going on a trip. And for the past couple of months, I'm really excited now because actually I won't be traveling for quite some time. And you are actually in the midst of traveling. So, what decides the trip? First of all, how does the trip come about?
so as you've surmised, when we're talking about trips, basically travel. So let's talk about travel, and it's a travel outside the country because you can plan
Okay,
a local
outside.
trip.
So, it's not let's go for a trip within the country. Because
Yeah,
technically, that's also traveling.
that's also a
Technically, you're
trip.
also
That's
a
basically
tourist. But
yeah,
let's talk about foreign travel. Okay, sounds
because
good.
when you're gonna do some foreign travel, there's a lot more steps that come into play compared to a local travel. Like here
Okay,
locally, when we go on a
okay.
trip, you know, we just take a drive. We are solely responsible. We take a 2 hour drive to either, the interior, the savannah, and then hop on like the little boats, go upstream the river, and then, you have a little
Or by
weekend
car.
vacation in the jungle or by car. Yeah, there's a lot of, recreational spots that's basically reachable for a day trip or a few days. But when you gotta travel outside the country, there's a lot more that kind of comes into play, such as plane tickets. It's a substantial financial burden as well compared to a local trip. So you gotta cover plane tickets, hotels, or if you have a friend in the country you're visiting, you can maybe stay. They have an extra room for you or a couch. That's a way to save.
Okay.
But
Before we dive too deep into the accommodation, the plane, the travel, everything, I do want to go back a little bit further. Like making the decision on the destination. Let's
so
start with that one.
yeah, okay. So for me, there's a few bucket list destinations. That's just from a perspective of wanting to experience the culture or in just having an experience for me. So just on top of my head, the two or three that immediately come to mind for me are a Japan trip. That's to experience the culture
Okay.
and
Okay.
The next one is an Iceland trip. That's to experience the landscapes, nature, and the aurora borealis. Right? That's
Okay.
what they call
Yes.
the northern lights.
Yeah.
And yeah, those are the two that are quite on top now. And how did I decide on those? It's basically I love the outdoors. If you know me,
Yeah.
going on interior
Yeah.
trips.
If you know
So
Diego, you should know about that.
if it's nature, it's easy to pick beautiful destinations. You see it on other social media platform, Facebook, Instagram. You see this out of this world scenes, maybe some scenes in movies to relive. When I was in New Zealand, I saw like scenes from the Lord of the Rings. I walked those valleys that saw in Lord of the Rings. So it's kind of
Did you at any point reenact those scenes in your head?
no, but you get a sense of, oh, this is where this was shot. When I was in New York, you see the Friends, the shop, the
Central
coffee
Park.
shop,
Yeah.
at
Yeah.
Central Park. Some are more disappointing than others. Some can't I are kind of underrepresented in
Okay.
media.
What's your
So
uh most memorable situation with something that you either underestimated, overestimated, or so you build it up in your head too much, or you were pleasantly surprised, or it's just something that you remember, like you were like, oh, that's something you have to experience to understand. That people don't really talk about it, but you had to be there to actually experience it.
okay, um, one I'd say overhyped, but you have to experience it at least once to understand it. It's New York.
Okay,
Like
overhyped. Why?
like walking through Central Park in Manhattan through the cities. It's great for the first day or two. And you do feel a different energy there. And I have to say, what we see in media, it's kind of just a sliver, but there is a different energy in the air there. But once you start going to the subways, once you start experiencing nightlife a bit, it really
Okay.
smells like piss.
Okay, hold on. When were you there?
I was there in 2018 and I was there in 2022.
Okay.
And yeah, 20 around May, June, so middle of the year.
Okay. So what I really want to know, if you walk through New York, do the buildings still have these giant nets at level two, three, four, giant nets sticking out of the buildings?
I actually never saw those. Actually never saw
Okay.
those.
No, it's no, I'm talking because I haven't been in New York, I think, for close to 30 years. I've been in New York in the 90s.
Oh wow.
And yes,
That's a
and
totally
my
different.
yeah, my only memory of New York, this is a weird memory, but that's why I want to share it, is there were these nets sticking out of all those skyscrapers, all those big buildings.
Yeah, to catch people wanting to
And I
jump
was
off.
like,
But
I was asking my dad, like, what is that for? It was like if people jump out. It's like, huh? But of course, you don't you haven't ever seen buildings that tall before. Like I'm talking, I'm a kid, so I'm looking and I'm going like, so that's the only thing I actually can remember from New York. I don't have any active memories other than that specific memory. My most interesting memory is the Mona Lisa.
okay, that's
Like,
France, right? Yeah,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
I'm not sure if
So
I've seen the real Mona Lisa.
when you
I
go to
was
the
there
Louvre,
at the Louvre. Yeah.
yeah. So when you go there, there's a lot of things to see, but I was shocked how small the painting is. Like, and I'm not even sure that it's because it's actually small. But first of all, the room that it is in is big. So you're expecting a big painting, and it's
The
so crowded.
distance,
No,
the
it's
distance
so
too.
insanely crowded. So getting close to it is kind of already difficult as well. But then also those those kind of galleries have like huge paintings. So even if it's not actually that small, it's just compared to all the other paintings, it's like it's really small. And that's something I feel like people don't talk about that often. But that's something you only understand when you're in the room with the Mona Lisa, that you're like, oh, okay, this is, for some it might be what they experienced, but for me, what they were expecting. But for me, it was like that's it felt off a little bit.
Yeah, like museums, I'd say aren't really my thing. I haven't been,
Unless if you're in the UK.
it depends on the type of museum. Like I can vibe a bit in the more natural types of museum, the historical types of museum, but like for a short amount of time. The artsy type of museums, they don't like intrigue me
Okay,
as much.
okay. Um, I think the UK is special in the sense that if you want to go to a museum, it's free. All of them in the UK are free. That's pretty damn cool. I think that's cool. Uh, we drove all the way to Florence because I wanted, at the time Florence had the most Leonardo da Vinci paintings, and I wanted to see them. Um, Not necessarily. The experience was great though, and I also have to confess that my mom is a visual artist, so that also takes into account. But I have to recommend a museum for you. If you're ever in the Netherlands, you have to go to Helmond. Yeah, I'm telling you to go to the Mount of Hell. But Helmond has this museum, and it's the Museum of the Home Computer.
Mm. Hmm.
And it has like over a dozen computers. And the people working there are also kind of almost volunteering to work there because they get to go on those computers, and all the computers that are actually working, as a guest you're allowed to go on them. And
That's going back in time, basically.
that's
Yeah.
like for me and my
But
children, that was like wahala. It
so
was like,
that's one thing I haven't encountered much in museum, that sense of interactiveness. I have
yeah,
been to a few, but
no,
like,
this is was insane
like
because
really using or touching or
they
doing
have an
something with it.
arcade. So if you walk in on the left, you have an arcade which has all the old video games. So you can play all the old video games. We were the four of us, my wife and the children. We did Mario Kart with four controllers against each other, like the OG Mario Kart
Yeah.
with the four of us against each other. Like that's like nostalgic, like the most nostalgic thing you can have. And then um, you can go play Pong, but you can play the Pong with the original controllers, like the roll-up controllers, and then it goes all the way to the newer era. So you end up with, again, a gaming section, but that time with like the newer games as well.
Mhm.
So you can kind of do a whole trip of everything. The first versions of Mario, like
Yeah.
the first version of Mario was like such a big like box, and then the screen was like really tiny, and then you have to. It's really interesting
That's
how they.
that's the
Yeah,
museum I think I would look forward to visiting, because it also aligns with my interests and things I
yeah.
enjoy and doing. So in
But
that sense, yes.
anybody who played games or video games or has a
Has that 90s nostalgia.
no, but even 2000s, like, and even for the kids, like the home computer museum in Helmond is like, I'm gonna be an ambassador for that museum forever because that was like one of the coolest experiences ever in a museum. Yeah.
Yeah, coming from you, that's some high regard.
No, but
So
it's
coming
like I you could completely lose me for a day there. Like you
yeah,
could and even my children loved it as well. But also how they did some very clever stuff with like the floppy disks. So they have like a little bar like in the middle, and they just have basic stuff. So you can't really get any food or anything there. It's just basic drinks, maybe a pack of chips. That's it. But then they decorated the whole bar with these old floppy disks with basically games on them. You could see which games were on those floppy disks. So that those kind of things are really cool. I think the only thing that I was not missing, but like could have been more in the forefront because it's very popular now is Tetris. I hope there was like more of a Tetris section, but they had everything like the old IBM computers. They had the whole Apple basically collection, almost all the apples like from the 80s and 90s were there, so you could really see the evolution of the computers. It was really was pretty cool. I can't
Like how
believe I
much?
spoke for 5 minutes about
I was about to say, like, it
it.
really left an impression.
Yeah,
But coming back to the original
yeah,
question, like what
yeah,
goes into choosing a destination or where
yeah,
to go? Like for me, it's those two things, like, either experiencing a culture,
yeah,
and like Asia, it's one of the top lists, and most of all Japan. And the other one is like experiencing breathtaking landscapes. So that's why
yeah.
Iceland is kind of also high there on the list. Do you have something in particular that kind
So
of
that's
works for
interesting.
you?
So I've let go of my bucket list because I'm personal situation or personal stage in my life where I'm more family oriented. So the bucket list has kind of I don't feel it as still, but it's not uh, as important at the moment. For me, it's really
No, you
picking
could have a
out.
bucket list to, do something with the family.
Yeah, so I think I still want to go to Africa. I think that's
Yeah,
one of the things
that's
because I've been to Europe, I've been to Asia, I've been to North America, South America. I
Africa
haven't
and
been to
Asia
all.
are the
Yeah,
two
I
countries.
definitely want to go back to Asia. Definitely, I definitely want to go to Africa, and it's going to be a difficult choice where to go because I want to go to Egypt as much as I want to go to South Africa. I also want to go more to like Ghana or Namibia even because I've seen so many interesting things, but there are even more that I'm mentioning. So that will be a difficult one
Yeah,
because
I
I'm not
remember
sure
because
how that
Kenya
one
is on
would
my
fit
list.
in.
Because I
What?
have a friend, Kenya.
Kenya.
I have a friend in Kenya. He told me,
Kenya's
you gotta
so
come to Kenya. When you land at the airport, you are in the
yeah,
safari.
yeah. So there's so many African countries I still want to visit, but I don't have a clue like how I can connect it. Even though I think what Amaya is currently planning something to make that possible, I think for me personally, I can't make it work at the moment, but that's something in the future I want to do. But also, being situated in South America, I do feel I haven't seen enough of South America either. So I think that's also something. I definitely want to go to Peru. I definitely want to go to Bolivia. It's like Colombia, Argentina, even well Brazil. I've seen some parts
Yeah,
of Brazil,
like
but I
Spanish speaking
haven't.
America.
Yeah, but I haven't seen Rio. So, like, and there's so many different places that you could want to go to, but for me, it's traveling has become much more functional for me.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
get that.
yeah. So
So
I think that's the biggest difference as far as to planning a trip. The trips that I currently plan are really much more functional.
yeah, so I'm gonna be in Brazil. I think the next week or in 2 weeks, one of those periods, and I'm gonna be in Sao Paulo. And I recently
Ooh,
learned
interesting.
in interesting fact. There's a trainer here from Sao Paulo who came to Suriname, and he said, like, I think it was Sao Paulo has one of the biggest Japanese like towns in the whole Americas.
Ah, interesting. That's definitely
So
interesting.
yeah,
And that's also why Los Angeles, either you love it or you hate it. because Los
I
Angeles
yeah,
is
I didn't
different
feel Los Angeles.
cities. Yeah, it's so many different cities into one. It's like such a big sprawl that you're like, what is this? You can't fully comprehend it unless you have somebody guiding you from a specific culture. Then it's really good because you're kind of getting the best of that
Yeah, the
culture.
local experience.
So I think like that's also a difference between different countries and different experiences, and there are different approaches. So I also think it depends on who you're with and what kind of trip you're gonna have. I think your travel companions, it really differs. If it's family, it's gonna be a different thing.
Yeah,
If it's
that's
friends, it's gonna be a different thing. If it's business, it's gonna be a different thing. If you're gonna travel solo, it's gonna be a different thing as well. And just for people to understand, what is it like to travel alone? Because I personally, I mean, I've traveled alone, as been on an airport and an airplane alone, but I've never really traveled alone. So, what's the biggest difference between traveling in a group or with multiple people and just by yourself?
so. Going back to you for a second, you said you've been alone, but what do you mean with you haven't really been alone?
I've
Like,
I've done trips alone where the flying part was alone, the
but you
being
had
on the airport
someone,
was alone,
yeah.
but at the end destination there would be someone, or I would meet someone within, I would already know who I was going to meet. So I would be alone, and then I would be alone for maybe 2 days, but I was there to meet someone or be part of a group.
But someone you already knew, or some stranger.
Well, at least an organization or
Yeah,
something that
okay.
I
So
was
I would
familiar with
consider
or
that alone.
working
Yeah,
with.
yeah.
Business travel is the same thing. It's not really alone because you're going to a conference, you're going to meet a business partner, you're going. So for me, that's not really traveling alone. If you understand what I mean.
Yeah, I kind of do. Okay, so coming back to me,
Yeah.
yeah, I have experienced travel alone. I've gone to New Zealand completely alone. That's 25 hours in the air, in a in a you know that's only in the air, not counting layovers.
Right.
I've gone to Niagara Falls alone from New York. I've gone done a Estonian like tour, kind of the outskirts alone. So I've walked the streets of Bonn, Germany. I wasn't alone, but it was kind of alone. I had another friend with me, but for I think 2 or 3 hours to our place of accommodation during midnight, going on the wrong train. So
Oh God.
it's to say what's the difference. I guess if you're alone, it how do I phrase this? It pushes you more out of the comfort zone. It pushes you more out of, asking for help. It pushes you more to kind of rely on locals, but also to be resourceful. To You have your phone, you have internet on the airports, to start Googling, to start translating if it's in another language. Like, how do I get from A to B? Like, I don't have a written checklist, but there's some steps I go into my head. Okay, my accommodation is 2 hours from here. Like, what's the best way? Can I walk? Is there public transportation? Is there a train? Do I need to Uber? Do the Uber drivers drive 24/7, or is there a set amount of time? So you're gonna start learning to plan real fast. That's one thing. Unless you're more of the free spirit type and go, oh, I'll just go on a hike, or I'll just hitchhike, or ask someone for directions and whatever. I've driven alone in New Zealand from one city to another city for 4 hours, going through the mountains, and suddenly you have no reception and you see no cars for 30 minutes, and then just stopping by the side of the road because you see an amazing view, and going to climb a mountain for 5 minutes and take a photo, and then run back to the car and continue the journey. So it's a roller coaster of experiences and emotions. But I think most importantly, if you're going back to basics, the flight part, it's as long as you have everything planned out, you know where you have to go, you know your times when you have to board. I think you'll be fine. It's not that much different from traveling with someone else. So if you're traveling with someone else, then the question is, are you the one managing stuff, or is the other person managing the stuff?
I want to get into
That's the
that.
biggest question.
Yeah, I want to get into that. I used to be, I used to love planning stuff. Like that was like whether it's an event at school or just organizing an event in general or organizing a trip. I once organized a trip together with a committee of I think 5 people. We organized a trip for 40 people to Barcelona, and then two of us decided that a month in advance we would go to Barcelona just for the weekend. So we drove, no, we took public transport to Eindhoven, went to the secondary airport of Barcelona. That trip was like Ryanair, $25 or something. I
Ryanair.
think,
Oh, I
I
have
think,
experience with
yeah,
Ryanair.
I think the bus trip from Girona, the secondary airport from Barcelona um, to the capital was more expensive than the airport, the plane ticket, something like that.
Yeah, so
And
I gotta say, Ryanair is
yeah,
cheap, but I still wouldn't recommend it. Unless you're really on a budget and you still have that
no,
student life. Fine.
so for people that don't know, like these kind of airlines, they work with secondary airports. And
Mhm.
secondary airports means it's a little bit more
Deserve it.
off the grid, off the grid. Um, it means that security much easier,
That
not
is
that much of a hassle. You go through it a little bit faster. But when you arrive in the city where you have to be, you're not actually in the city. And the reason why those tickets are cheaper is because of the airport tax, because
yeah.
secondary airports ask less airport tax. So it's cheaper. And I recently learned that actually Amsterdam, the airport tax in Amsterdam is actually for Schiphol is actually really low because they want to become or they are considered the hub. So they don't make them that expensive. So that means that you can get pretty damn good flights from Amsterdam to anywhere in the world, but still Ryanair tickets are cheaper because they go to secondary airport. You just have to take into account that the bus from the secondary airport in Barcelona to the city
Might be
takes
more
you
than your ticket.
might be more than your ticket, like in total, going to the city and going back to the airport at the end of the trip. That combined might be more than your Ryanair ticket. But yeah, so I used to plan all these trips, and then I've now have people in my life uh, that want to decide a little bit more, like my wife and my mother. So they kind of decide the trip, and my dad likes to plan things as well. So I feel like there can be two captains on a ship. So I just let them decide, and I go with the flow.
So then the
Yeah,
follow-up question is, okay,
yeah.
they decide who does the logistics. You
No, like
that
no, no, no. I'm very practical on that. If you want to decide, you're gonna do the logistics. Like I'm not doing the logistics if you decide. Let's make that clear. And I'm also not gonna decide and not do the logistics. Like that that doesn't feel right for me either. So it's either I take a back seat and I let you control everything, or I'm in control and I decide. And like uh, our business trips for our company, that's where they give me free rates because often I'm the one most experienced traveler in the group. So, but even there, I've had colleagues that are business partners that are like experienced travelers. And if they want to organize it, I take my hands off as well. But it's only because I see there's enjoyment for them. So I let them enjoy it. if I see that I'm with somebody, a friend or a colleague or a family member, and they don't actually enjoy organizing it, I will definitely take over. I will get started involved, but most of the times I don't.
Yeah, I
How's
definitely.
yeah? How's that for you? Is it different?
So I, if I'm alone, I have to do this stuff
Yeah.
sometimes. You kind of outsource it a bit, but if I'm in a group, I prefer to take a back seat and sure, I'll tag along. But from my own experience, oftentimes when I decide to take the back seat, either one, they still come to me to help plan this, or two, it goes, I won't say not as efficient. Not necessarily wrong, but not as
Yeah.
efficient or not as you know fleshed out as
Does
if
that
the
bother
group.
you though? If you take a
Yes.
back seat? Yeah, that's the problem.
Yes.
If you're able to let it go, I've been able to let it
And the
go.
thing is,
Yeah,
because I have this experience in
yeah.
solo travel and group travel as well, certain things already. You've experienced certain things. Certain hacks, shortcuts that you can do to either lower cost or make things faster. And it's hard to find someone with a comparable kind of ways of doing
So
it.
that's why they come to you.
Yeah.
If they know it, they come to you. But I mean, that's a good thing, and it does also keep you involved because that's also the thing. And if you enjoy it thoroughly, for me, also on my recent travels, I've become more aware that yeah, I want to get more involved. Whether it's just to take the pressure and all the decision making and logistics off somebody else's plate, but also I've come to a point that I do want to have, if I'm traveling, I do want certain things.
What are some of the
So
minimals that you say you
I
want?
like good food.
Yeah,
So I'm upset that when I travel and I travel with somebody else, and they make decisions on food.
based on price.
No, no, not necessarily based on
Or
price, but they make decisions on food on based what they know.
oh yeah, that I know that pet peeve.
Like,
Yeah, yeah.
like, and
Try
if it's
something,
some no, but if it's somebody very unexperienced, the what they know is very limited.
but I don't blame them because sometimes
No,
it's
no,
also safe.
no. It's
Because
it's definitely. I
yeah,
don't blame them. It's not. It's safe. That's all true. But that's where I'm like, okay, maybe I should be more involved, and I should like suggest different options, right? And that's something that I feel like, okay, then I have to get involved. So that's one of the things. And when I do really get involved, is like if people do expect me to be involved, then I will. And I always, whatever travel, I always at least take a day for myself. Like no
yeah,
matter if we're in a group or anything, there will be like just something random, and I will decide, no, I'm sitting this one out. I'm staying at home, or I'm doing something else. So even if in a group situation, as soon as travel is longer than 4 days, I want one day for
What's
myself.
what's your ideal group size if it's like a fun thing to do? Like how many people would you say?
I
Say
think
you are
between
with
six and eight would
friends.
be the sweet. I think between 6 and 8 would be the sweet spot. I have to say four is really nice as well.
Yeah, I would
So I
lean
would say
to
four, 6, or 8. I think those are the best groups. An uneven number is never good to travel with. Like yeah, maybe on the airplane when there's a row with 3 people, that would be the only, and there are only rows with 3 people, so three on the left, three on the right. Yeah, in those cases it's nice. That four isn't as nice, but still, yeah, I think 2, 4, 6, 8, 10 it starts becoming a little too big, too
yeah.
crowded. But Yeah, four
I,
six.
th-
Sorry,
I
I think four
yeah,
six
I
or
tend
eight.
to agree with that too. For
Yeah,
an even
yeah,
number, even logistics wise, it makes
yeah,
more sense as well because
yeah,
2 4 6 for
yeah.
transportation, you can
Yeah,
split
so
that.
car four, fine. Six, you need two vehicles, so eight would be more. Or six, you can still get one of the bigger vehicles, and you can still
Yeah,
all fit all six
but
in them.
still with six, you could
Yeah,
still take two small vehicles. It's
you can take two
easy.
small vehicles.
Yeah,
Vehicles. You
it's
can
easier
take
to split
yeah, you
and
can take like a
or
really in the US. You can take like a big vehicle that just easily fits six people, like adults, and you'll still have space for all your luggage.
yeah.
So it really yeah.
And also for accommodation, usually if you're booking a hotel, at least it's easier to split with 2 people, 4 people, or if you're in a bigger group, then an apartment makes more sense or a suite.
Okay.
So
So we've gotten to the part where we've decided on where we're gonna go. Preparations. How far in advance do you start?
so it depends, like uh, what what part of it needs to be planned out. So I think the most important thing is
The
tickets.
tickets.
Yeah, tickets, most important thing. Once your tickets and basically your travel dates are decided, and then the tickets, then you can start planning the rest. I'd
How
say you
far in
can start.
advance? Do you always try? I try to do it at least 6 months in advance.
Um, it could go from three to 6 months. Yeah, if I, you know, you also have some uncertainties like visas and seasons. So
Yeah.
you also need to take that into consideration. But yeah, I'd say 3 to 6 months is a sweet spot. Once you've got that set out, then the hack I have for looking for tickets, affordable tickets, is Google Flights. Actually, are you familiar with Google
Oh.
Flights?
Oh. Okay. Okay. We're
Like
going
that's
meta.
one of the best flight ticket trackers I have found because you
Okay.
can see historic prices. You can actually see historic prices. So, for example, if you want to, because I've planned a trip
Also,
to,
this season is not gonna work. Like, just don't because this season it's always up there. Oh, that's nice.
yeah,
Yeah.
if you plan to do a trip to Brazil, for example, because I'm going to Brazil, I've seen the recent trends. January and February are the sweet spots to book.
Hmm.
Then you get the lower rates. That's Balaam
Okay.
from Suriname, actually.
Yeah.
In Brazil itself, like local flights, they fluctuate um, from 50% off to 100. So you can get notifications, and that's on a weekly basis. You can see the fluctuations. So set some notifications, and I see that, and then book. So you get a price. You know,
Interesting.
a- and the hack with that is I have found sometimes retour tickets are uh, easier and
Yeah.
more affordable, but more often than not, I found that booking one-way tickets is actually more affordable
Really?
because you sometimes if you need to retour, then maybe the going flight is reduced, but the
Yes.
returning flight not. So if you book one-way tickets, you book one way this date when it's on a discount, and then you book the return ticket on another day, and it's discounted then. Then you save even more.
Interesting.
It's a
I
little more
just
tracking, but you can put notifications in when the deals come in. So it's
and I've
just a
gotten
matter of
so lazy with this because the airlines that I travel with are kind of set in stone for the past 5 years. So I
yeah. Okay,
just
so
I
okay,
just
look,
I just
the
pay
the,
the
the
lowest rate that's available and kind of when because it's all yield, right? So yield
yeah. Okay,
management,
so we're talking about airlines,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
So if you're traveling from Suriname,
yeah.
I would suggest get the retour ticket from Suriname to the first layover. So then it's
Yeah.
either Miami, Panama, Belém, Amsterdam. That's your first point outside the country.
Or
Get
Georgetown.
only or just get only that retour ticket.
Or Bilan.
Yeah, Belém. Get only
Yeah.
that retour ticket.
Yeah.
Once you have that, then search from that destination to your next destination, and then you'll find cheaper tickets. If you book straight from here
Oh
and
no.
to your end
No.
destination, never do that.
No.
Never do that.
No. No. That's terrible. That's true. No, okay, I don't do that, but still I tried to get that ticket. So getting from Paramaribo to the first destination,
Yeah,
I try to book it as soon as it's available because that's the guaranteed lowest rate.
yeah. So that one,
Yeah.
there's not much flexibility in. I agree with you there. So
So
get
for people that are not familiar, that are listening and not familiar with yield management is basically the basis of anything that has to do with supply and demand and services that are very supply and demand driven. And the idea of yield management is basically when the plane is fully empty, you have the best prices for the seats. As soon as the plane starts filling up, the the fuller the plane gets, the more
yeah, the
expensive the
higher.
plane
Yeah,
tickets get, because that's for optimization of the profit for the airline. So if the plane's already 80 to 90% full, you'll get insane ticket prices, and it's just better to take another plane that is a little more empty. And that,
there
for
is one
instance,
caveat in that.
yeah,
There is one caveat in that,
yeah,
and this is more for the risky travelers to book it like a day or
last
two
minute,
before, last
yeah.
minute,
So you
because
also have
then
like the last minute deals
yeah,
because they
because
have to,
then they
yeah,
want to fill the spot because an empty seat, cheap seat is better than an empty seat, right?
yeah.
So they just
But
want to
that
fill the
one
place.
is risky, like you
But
said,
that's for
because
the
you
risky
might not
traveler.
leave.
Yeah. So if you're
Yeah.
not don't have a set date, then that's an option you could do, but it's a gamble. And
So
yeah,
yeah. So I want to actually continue on that one because um, a lot of people don't understand why tickets are so expensive in the vacation time in Suriname. Like the end of the year, like you cannot get affordable tickets to go to the Netherlands or from the Netherlands to come here. And it's very simple. It's yield management. The plane's already full. You're paying like the maximum price for those
that's
tickets. The,
premium.
you're paying premium to premium because the planes are already full. So the only thing that you can do is again fly on dates that others don't want to fly. Fly on Christmas, fly on the first of the year. Those are kind of, or fly back later in January when everybody has already left.
Yeah.
So these are kind of like the only ways. But like I see people complaining on social media, mainly Facebook. I see people complaining on Facebook, like, how are the tickets so expensive? Sorry, those planes are full. So when the planes are full, you're not gonna get better pricing. So that's why if you're like a more seasoned long-term planning traveler, you just book the tickets as soon as they are available. And there's also some other tricks. There's certain days of the week that it's better to book your flights and your
Yes.
accommodation as well. So that also takes into account. And also another one, which is a little bit tricky, when you book your tickets, make sure you've cleaned the cache of the cache of the data of your browser and do it in a new browser
Yeah, I actually
because
found that isn't as, at least with the last trip, as
yeah, but it
relevant
happens.
anymore. It happens. I
No,
know.
it does still happen.
In the
There's still
past,
airlines that have websites where if you look for the same deal, it's kind of recorded and you'll pay more.
yeah, I get it, but like, say, believe me, the Google Flights hack kind of circumvents
Hack
that.
that.
Yeah. So that's why I say, like,
Yeah,
for me at least, I haven't had issues with that anymore. But I do know in the past I was
yeah,
aware of that and I did it exactly
yeah. And
like that before.
there's still websites that still it's still applicable for.
So on that note, I saw a article I think last week about KLM closing their local office for bookings. And yeah, there's been some noise around it. But I do have to say, it makes sense
No,
in the world.
the Dutch are just all about efficiency.
Yeah, because it's just
Like,
overhead that's
yeah,
not necessary.
yeah. So they
And
never really had an office, KLM office anymore in Suriname. They didn't even have the country manager for Suriname is now actually located, I think, at Curacao or something. So it's not even stationed here anymore. So we used to have a country manager for Suriname from KLM that was stationed in Suriname, but they're actually now stationed, or
yeah,
that person
like
is stationed in Curacao. So
the issue now is because everything is online now, and that's where we kind of fall into the short end of the stick, is because that infrastructure isn't accessible for like 90% of people here.
well, it's the same thing with Copa. Well, Copa,
Yeah.
there's a representative for Copa Airlines in Suriname,
Yeah.
but they don't have a physical office
No.
either.
So that
So,
just from a business standpoint, it makes total sense.
which
But
is interesting because they do a lot through travel agents, and I feel like that works because, and I had this discussion with a travel agent, and actually she got really upset with me because I used um, Mark Schaefer's analogy that travel agents, the traditional travel agents, would go extinct because people would start planning their own trips.
yeah,
And there's actually another side to that, which is good travel agents have deals not only with the airlines, but also with accommodations and the events and everything. So they can actually get deals that you cannot get. So that's also
mm,
interesting because those travel agents get those cheap plane tickets at a certain rate. And if they always sell them out, they will get like
yeah,
20 seats on a plane and they can keep that low price for the seats
it's
longer than the actual
pre-allocated. Yeah,
airline. Yeah, it's pre-allocated. So they,
because they
even
know
when
it's
the
a
airline,
definite sale, right?
yeah, so even when the airline kind of goes up in their pricing, you can still get maybe a lower rate at one of the travel agents.
Yeah, so I actually prefer booking my own trips now than using a travel agent, unless it is somewhere I'm not familiar yet or kind of. But as time has gone on, because believe me, I sent quote requests to for the trip I'm going on. It's a big group. They sent the recommendations, contact this person. I sent my request. I knew someone else that tours on Brazil. Send them a request. The quotes I got, because they automatically also assume checked baggage, right? And
Oh,
I saved maybe $300 or $400 by booking myself and using
okay.
different airlines because they booked from departure to end destination. I booked the Belem part,
Yeah.
as I mentioned before, the retour, and then I
Oh, yeah.
went to look for separate, more accommodating time slots as well, flying times,
So do
and
you fly
cheaper.
with Gull or Fueling or another one?
So actually combined Gol with Latam.
Oh, Latam. Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
because Latam has more flight options than Gol, so the times you can fly are also more agreeable.
Oh, that's another thing that you should take into account when you travel. Knowing, because that's also something you have to pay for at the airports, is your flight time when you leave as an airline. And oh my God, there have been some terrible flight times that I've experienced in my life. Getting up at 1 o'clock in the morning to take a flight is it's just never a good thing. Really never is. So before we close off segment one of Let's Go on a Trip, what are things that you should always plan in advance, and what are things that you can leave up to choice or book like as a last minute?
I'd say the most important things to do in advance and to recap this episode is basically your destination, choose the time you want to visit, season. Like, don't go there when it's freezing cold and you're not used to the cold. But, for you, what time do you want to be there? Not necessarily because it's cheap, but, how can you enjoy that destination the most in what season? And the second thing is book your tickets in advance if you can to get the best deals possible. And after that, accommodations, which will cover more in the second segment that will air next week. So those are the two most important things. And use Google Flights. It's an easy hack. And most
Does Google
importantly,
have something for accommodations like Google Flights?
probably there is if you just go use Google Maps basically. But I don't weigh it as much as the flight and history tracker because with accommodations you have more options. With flights, you really need, that allocated slot, and that's more crucial than accommodation. With accommodation, you can delay that a bit. So depending on your destination, you could even do that last minute. But we'll cover that more
Yeah,
in this
or
one.
depending on where you're going, what you're going for. If you're going to a conference, please do the accommodation in advance.
Yeah.
Trust me on that one. If you're going for a conference, don't do the accommodation last minute, or you'll be paying again, healed. You're gonna be paying a lot. But we're gonna close up this segment. This was the first episode of Let's Go on a Trip. And of course, we'll be back next week with a brand new episode where we'll go more into detail about what it's like to plan a trip. We hope you enjoyed this episode. Don't forget to subscribe on youtube.com/at Confoes. Follow us on Instagram at Confoes and subscribe to our newsletter at confoes.substack.com. This was Social Confoes. See you back here next week, same place, same time. Bye bye.